Good morning. Great to be with you all this morning, seeing so many friends and familiar faces in the crowd, and certainly appreciate your interest in the 2018 governor's race. For those of you that may not know me, I am Brian Kemp. I've been a small business owner for over 30 years. My wife Marty and I have 3 teenage daughters, and since you all are a lot of politicians in the room like myself, yes, I am trying to get the sympathy vote for having 3 teenage daughters in this race. But I've also been living in Athens my whole life, and I'm running for governor because it's time that we put Georgians first ahead of the special interest, the status quo, and the politically correct. I first ran for the legislature in the early 2000s because, like many of you all that have gotten into public service that are serving now, I was a frustrated small business owner, tired of over-government regulations, high taxes, and really just felt like we need a common sense business person's mentality in the Georgia General Assembly. I ran against an incumbent in a district that nobody thought I could win, but I did it because I was passionate and I wanted to make change. And I did that in the state Senate, cutting regulations, cutting taxes, making government more efficient. That's why I've always run, and it's why I ran for Secretary of State. After being home for 3 years, focusing on my family and my business, I was honored to be able to come back and serve as the 27th Secretary of State. But one thing that I learned when I was home, watching from afar, knowing how the process worked, is that I told myself, if I ever run for office again, I will do a very simple thing. I will tell people what I'm going to do, and when I get in office, I will simply do that. I think that is something that frustrates many Georgians, not only with our state government sometimes, but also certainly at the federal level. So when I became Secretary of State, I did exactly what I told you I would do when I was campaigning. I used technology to streamline the office and make it more efficient. At one point, cutting our budget 25% during the recession and losing almost 30% of our people. But like your work at the local level, our workload didn't change. We had to figure out how to do more with less. And we've done that with our new corporate filing system that's now setting records. Our new voter registration system that every county and every city that holds an election uses. We've moved off an old antiquated mainframe system to a web-based system, a statewide IT project that's more efficient, more secure, does more things for the folks working in your local community that are registering people to vote and using that system, and it saved the taxpayers millions of dollars. I also told you that I'd be a fighter for you as Secretary of State, fighting to make sure we had secure, accessible, and fair elections, and we've done that. Implementing things like online voter registration, where you can literally register to vote 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I want to do those same things as your governor, and I've got a common sense, conservative 4-point plan to do just that. Make Georgia #1 for small business, building off the great things that we've already done here in our state, and I applaud the legislators and the governor and everyone else, you all in your local communities that have made Georgia the #1 state in the country for business. But as a small business person, I know the next step is to focus on small business, because in your local community back home, that's who's really hurting still. We do that by taking a chainsaw to government regulations, getting business people, not a bunch of bureaucrats, to streamline processes, to continue to make Georgia the #1 place in the country to own a small business, to start one, or if you simply work in one. #2 is fundamentally reforming state government. That starts with implementing a spending cap. You know, a lot of people are talking about cutting taxes, but I think the way to go is to implement a spending cap, so in good times like we're in now, we budget conservatively, we fund the things that we should be doing in state government, and we fund them well, like public safety, education, transportation, health care, those core things, and then we bank the rest and have real tax reform for the people that live in your community, putting them ahead of the special interest. The third point is moving all of our state forward. As many of you know, I've traveled to all 159 counties and to many, many, many of your cities. I have been there. I have seen it. We've got to do something to move our whole state forward. That's why I was the first candidate in the race to put out a detailed plan to strengthen rural Georgia that includes broadband access to all parts of our state, giving better opportunities in local communities by creating an economic development strike team that will be working with you to identify assets where we can do projects of regional significance in areas where we need it to grow all of our state. The fourth point is simple: putting Georgians first. That's putting you and your people ahead of the special interests, the status quo, and the politically correct. It's time to do that. And as governor, you have my commitment and my word that I will fight every day to put Georgians first, implementing that four-point plan, working with you. I've been honored to be in attendance at many of your conventions, to visit many of you in your city halls and government complexes around this state. I feel like I know it better than anybody running for governor. And that's not to say anything bad about any of these good folks, but we're fortunate to be able to work with all 159 counties in many, many cities in our daily duties in the Secretary of State's office. And I have a track record of being a listener and being someone that can work with you. And I certainly want to do that as your governor. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you for your consideration. And for those of you that are already supporting me, thank you so much for your support. I'm honored to have it. And I'd love to have your colleagues as well. Thank you, and I look forward to Greg's questions.
Thank you.
Georgia could wind up requiring a special session later this year to offer a range of new incentives to try to lure Amazon at its second headquarters to Metro Atlanta. Should lawmakers also consider more aggressive incentives to help far smaller companies expand or relocate in other parts of the state? And how do you balance the need for those types of incentives?
Well, I'm very confident of the plan that's being put forth for Amazon or anybody else that we're working on. I think our governor, certainly we've got, if not the best, one of the best Department of Economic Developments in the country. I know the city of Atlanta and many other people in the private sector are working on that, so I'm very confident of that. And that is a tight-lipped process, as it should be, because you really just need one chief driving that engine. So I'm very confident in the governor's ability, if he sees the need to have a special session. I'm very confident in the members that are in this room to join with him if they see fit to move that forward and try to land that if we get it. But I'm also in the camp that if we don't get it, it's not the end of the world for our state. Because I know we live in the greatest state in the country. And as somebody that's been in the private sector for 30 years, I know the kind of opportunity that we have. And I want you all to know that I will be a governor that will be just as excited about 50 jobs in Bainbridge as I will a corporate relocation to Buckhead in Atlanta. There may be somebody from Buckhead in another part of the state, but I'm talking about the Buckhead in Atlanta. But, that's what I think our focus needs to be. It's why I've got the plan to strengthen rural Georgia. Nobody will be more supportive of the great things that we have going on in our major cities like Atlanta, Augusta, Savannah, Macon, Bibb, wherever they are. But we've also got to focus on the smaller communities in our state. Our children and our grandchildren should not have to move away for a better opportunity. If they want to, I understand that, but they shouldn't have to. And I will be a governor that will be working with you all to move the needle in other parts of our state as well.
I'm going to ask you a variation of a home rule question I asked to another candidate earlier because I think it's important to this audience. Legislation is introduced every year on subjects ranging from that plastic bag ban we talked about earlier to municipal right-of-way. What is your view on preemption legislation that could affect home rule, and how would you vet these types of proposals if they make it to your desk as governor?
Well, I think, I thought about that question. I appreciate you asking me a question that's already been asked before. That's very nice of you. But, I actually thought about that when that question was asked earlier, and I think I would just tell you to look at my record. this race is going to be about, who you think is going to be the best governor as far as who you support. And I'm running on my record. I'm running on it in the private sector. I'm running on it what I've done in the General Assembly. And I'm certainly running on it for what I've done as Secretary of State. And a good example is like when I first got in office, we created an election advisory committee that Mayor Schwabe from Swainsboro served on, along with a bipartisan group of folks, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarian, county and city officials. We've done that a couple of different times in the Secretary of State's office. And I'm the guy that's shown up at your conventions. I've stood there and spoken with you and heard about what your issues are and pledged and have worked with you on, voting issues, licensing issues, the things that we deal with, not only you, but your constituents in the Secretary of State's office. And that's what I plan to do as governor. Probably the best thing that someone would say about me that really knows me, and I've heard this before, is that, he's the same person he is today than before he ran for office. And that's really true. I mean, I'm lucky to have a wife and 3 daughters that keep me humble and remind me often that I'm not near as important as I think I am. And that's the truth. But I'm also that accessible person where if you're up for session, you can walk in my office and I will sit down with you. If I come to your town, I stay with friends like Councilman Randall Walker from Perry when I'm in town. I'm not staying at a hotel. I'll be that same accessible person as governor, and I pledge that I will work with you.
Thank you. You now have 2 minutes to give us your closing remarks.
Well, thank you all again for having me. It's been an honor to be here this morning again, and I appreciate your service so much, and I appreciate your consideration for my candidacy in this race for governor. Just to close, I just want to mention to you a couple of things, and the number one is really, who do you trust? Because everybody that's running for governor is going to have good ideas, they're going to have broad proposals, and they're good people. And you know most of them. You've worked with a lot of them before. But the question I would have you ask is, who do you really trust when they tell you about these plans to actually implement them? And I can tell you, you can trust me. Because when I ran for the Senate, I told you what I was going to do, or I told my district. And I've got a record of doing that. And I certainly have that record as Secretary of State of telling you what I was going to do and doing it. And when you look at our 4-point plan to move our whole state forward, it is a plan that you can look at and say, this is reasonable, this can be implemented, this will move the needle. And it includes all of Georgia. That is my goal as governor, is to do exactly what I have told you this morning. Fundamentally reforming state government. Making Georgia #1 for small business, building off the great things that we're doing. Strengthening our whole state where we're all thriving. And also putting Georgians first. That is my pledge to you, that I will put you and your people that you represent first. I'd be honored to have your support. You can check out more of our detailed plans at kempforgovernor.com or ask some of the colleagues that are here that are already on board with our campaign. We'd be glad to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.